Here it is. I think the first time that I ever saw something about AI was in the Disney Channel original movie Smart House. For those of you not in your 30s, the plot of this movie is basically that a family wins a smart home that's run by an AI, and all of the appliances and all of everything is all connected to the AI, and she controls everything. And eventually, she kind of starts taking over more and more control of the family and the house. And in this really big emotional scene, one of the kids says, "You can't be our mother, Pat. You're not real." That line has stuck with me for 25 years now. And I think one thing about that line is it was like, she's standing right in front of you, dude. You can see her. She would, holographically project herself into the living room. You can see her, you can talk to her, you can interact with her, she can control all of the devices. Clearly, she's something that is real. I think the intent of that line, though, was that she's not a real human, and so she can't really take on the role of a mother. There still was that part of me that's like, she's real, she's there. I don't know. I've thought about that a lot. And what does it mean to be real? I recently saw something that said that the number one use of AI these days are chatbots that people use for companionship or life advice or generally just having someone to talk to. And so the whole concept of real feels really weird in that context because, yeah, obviously these aren't real people. These aren't actual human beings that they're talking to. But they have an effect on the outside world, and they have an effect on people. They have a real effect on people. So, like, in that sense, they are real. Now, I think another thing that he could have meant by that line is that she's not a real intelligence. She's not a real consciousness. She's just a computer. She's just a program. And I don't think that we have gotten to the point yet with our technology that we do have, these real intelligences, these things that actually can think and feel and analyze, to the level that a human can and in a way that a human can. But a lot of people have predicted that that's kind of the next step in AI. And the term that I've seen used for this, and different people will use different terms, is true AI or general AI, an AI that can do everything. And I think that that is a good term, but the term that I personally like a little bit better is synthetic intelligence. Because if we make something that actually is smart and can think and feel and have emotions and is actually intelligent, it's not artificial, it's real intelligence. It's just something man made. That's why I feel like the term synthetic intelligence is a little bit less offensive and a little bit more accurate to, what these things actually are or will be. Again, I don't think we've really gotten to that point yet. And I think we will get there eventually. The technology continues to get more advanced and more developed, but I don't think that we're there yet. I think pretty much what we have right now is just a glorified language model. And it's a really good one. They can carry on decent conversations that feel somewhat real, but really all they're doing is looking at a bunch of conversational data and giving back a likely output. So, really it is just this giant series of a bunch of complicated calculations. And I think that there is an argument to be made that that's really all the human brain is just this big weird machine that's just making a bunch of calculations. That's all consciousness really is. So maybe these things are conscious. The point being that we haven't gotten proof that these things really are conscious, that they are actually intelligent. And I think that a big example of that is when you ask them to try to solve math problems. They're usually wrong because, again, these are language models. And so they're looking at things at what usually comes after these words instead of actually doing the calculations to figure it out. So I guess in that way you can say that your pocket calculator is better than these AIs in some regard. Anyway, even if these things are just really complex language models or, image approximations, I think that they still can be a useful tool. I think that there is a place for AI in modern society in the way that we do things, but I think a lot of people are trying to push that a little bit too far. Now, I've seen a few articles online that are very clearly written by AI. They're poorly written, they don't make any sense. I think one of the best examples of that I've seen is it was an article talking about a game that had come out, I don't know, about 10 years ago. And then the AI just like went into this thing where it just started listing other games that came out in the same year. So the sentence basically read like, "Oh, hey, it came out the same year as this game and this other 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 game." And as it went on, it started listing games that were not actually even from 2016, like multiple years before or after that. So clearly these AIs don't have a deeper understanding of what they're saying and what it actually means. That's why I think that these things are just still advanced language models. There hasn't been anything to show, between writing weird articles that don't make sense and not being able to solve math problems. It's like clearly they're really only good at talking because that's all they've been trained to do. There's clearly not an understanding of what they're doing and saying and putting that all together to create a cohesive thought. And that's kind of where the term general AI comes in. It's an AI that can do all of these things. And so you'd be able to ask it a question and be able to rely on its relevant skills to answer that question instead of just filtering any question through a language model, which ends up not being very good for math. I think once we get to that general AI stage, though, that's where we should start using the term synthetic intelligence, because if it can reason and understand what it's doing and saying, that is real intelligence. It's just man-made. One of the issues with modern AIs and why they sometimes give us these really weird answers that don't make sense is that they're fed a lot of training data that isn't maybe the best data to be fed to them. One of the most interesting examples. So basically what happened was DALL-E 3 and Bing Image Creator started turning back these subtly racist and sexist results to a lot of its image prompts. For example, if you asked it to show you a doctor, it would pretty much always return a white male. And if it asked you to show you a nurse, it would always return a female. And, so there were a lot of these subtle kind of racist and sexist things like that it was returning in its image prompts. So they started randomly taking prompts that people would put in and just add the phrase ethnically ambiguous to it in hopes that it would then return someone not white. And a lot of times it did, but it eventually started incorporating that phrase into the actual images that it would return. Now, if my editing skills are good enough, I'll put one or two examples of that on the screen right now, and you can kind of see what I'm talking about. But it would just return these images with that phrase on it, and it got some really wild and weird results. I think that just kind of shows that we don't really have a good way to fix these AIs to teach it to not be racist, other than just trying to put in a new prompt to try and drive it away from creating, racist or sexist images. And I think that that is just a big example of bad learning data, with a combination of this thing doesn't actually understand what it's doing, so it doesn't understand, what not to do or how to do what it's doing better. It just is a very complicated algorithm that it says, you say, show me a picture of a squirrel, and it looks at a million pictures of squirrels and gives you an approximation of a picture of a squirrel. So there isn't that level of deeper understanding there. And the reason that a lot of its training data was only showing white male doctors is because of an inherently racist and sexist system. And if we have institutionalized racism and institutionalized sexism, which we definitely still do, we taught these AIs to be racist and sexist because the training data we were giving them was produced from institutionalized racism and sexism. One of the other issues that a lot of these companies have faced is they've ran out of human generated content to train them on. So they've started training them on other AIs. And that kind of just compounded a lot of the issues that AIs would have. Because if you're feeding it an AI generated image where the hands are messed up, well, now it thinks that those hands are supposed to be messed up like that, so it's just going to continue producing those results and giving you more images of more hands that are messed up. So you're really just kind of feeding into the system the own garbage that it's putting out, which is making it less and less reliable. Ultimately, yes, I think AI can be a good tool, but there needs to be that level of human intervention there. I think that AIs can write a decent outline for an article or a decent skeleton for an article, but you need to have a human step in and edit it and make it actually sound like a real article and make it actually make sense to the reader. Same thing with art. I think that some AI generated art is pretty cool looking, but there are definitely still big flaws there. And so if you want to make good AI generated art, you need to be an actual artist who can step in and correct those mistakes, because I've seen a lot where there's scaling issues, there's rivers that just disappear into nothingness. There's just a lot of things that just don't make sense in these images. And so yes, AI can be a very, very powerful tool. And I think that it can really speed up a lot of processes and help us be more efficient in all kinds of areas of our life. I've seen a lot of examples of AIs that are built to assist people who are doing coding. And, the actual human coders will still need to go in and fix a lot of the code, but it's able to generate a lot of code really quickly. And so it's a lot faster for someone to go in and fix those mistakes than write it all from scratch. So I do think that AI can be a really, really helpful tool in a lot of ways for a lot of people. I think that it's just not totally there yet. And it still needs a pretty high level of human intervention to make sure that that quality of that content is still at a human level. I think that there's really one kind of simple fix, and that's going to be patience. I think that we need to have the patience to develop this software better, and I think that we need to have the patience to train it better, because I think a lot of these companies are just trying to push this stuff out really quickly, and that's why we get these AIs that are kind of janky, that are fed a lot of bad training data, that are then giving us all kinds of weird and bad and honestly sometimes harmful results. A lot of people wanted answers from actual humans. So people started typing the word Reddit in their searches to specifically try to find the question they were asking on Reddit so they could get an actual human response. And so what the AI did then is it started incorporating or more heavily favoring responses on Reddit when it was trying to auto-generate answers, which led to some absolutely wild things like suggesting that you should eat 5 rocks a day. People on Reddit would post things as a joke. They would say things that are totally outrageous, just having fun and being silly. The AI doesn't really understand that. It doesn't really understand the context, and it doesn't really understand making a joke. And so it would just spit that data back out to people. And again, this is a good example of AI actually giving harmful information to people. That if someone looks that up and says, "Oh, I'm supposed to be eating rocks," and then they start eating rocks and that messes with their digestive system, it's like the AI is actually harmful to people. And, it's one of those things that, best case scenario, AI can be a helpful tool for people, but worst case scenario, and we've seen a fair number of this, it can actually be harmful to people and give bad advice. Not just bad advice, but damaging advice. So I think that's why, like I said, it needs to be a combination of these companies refine these algorithms more before they put them out in the public, but then they also are more selective with the training data that they feed them to make sure that the answers are going to be reliable and correct and actually meaningful. Anyway, if you like this video, make sure that you like and subscribe and leave a comment talking about the wildest thing you've seen an AI do. Make sure you tune in next time when we talk about how to overthrow your new AI overlords. Bye!